In our last video, we looked at some of the best games released in 2024, so it's only right that we look at some of the not so good games. Sit back and relax whilst we explore the biggest flops of 2024. At number 10 we have Concord. This was a hero shooter FPS that was in development for 8 years and cost over $400 million to make. Sony backed Concord to be a massive success and transitioned from a video game to a global franchise. In an alternative timeline, you may have taken your Tinder date to see Concord the movie. There were reports of a toxic workplace environment, as well as the devs thinking the game would be an instant hit. This meant they were reluctant to listen to feedback and just wanted to do their own thing, which was the equivalent of saying, "Trust me bro, the game's gonna be sick," turning around and putting their headphones back on. It released to a mixed reception, with PC gamers stating it's underbaked, overpriced and an outdated hero shooter. They also stated the hero's weapons aren't good enough, making gunfights exhausting. Now, I'm no businessman, but when players are complaining the gunfights are boring in an FPS, you've got a bit of a problem. They had bigger problems when it came to sales, but I believe this was self-inflicted. You see, hero shooters are typically free. Overwatch, Valorant and TF2 to name a few, but these are your main competitors. The game wasn't being sold for $10 either, they wanted $40. A week after release, the game had only sold 25,000 units across PlayStation and Steam. It didn't even reach 1,000 simultaneous plays on Steam, and a few weeks later the game was shut down and delisted on all platforms. All players were issued a refund and Sony closed Firewalk Studios a month later. Next we have Unknown 9 Awakening, which was developed by Sweet Baby Inc. If you've not heard of Sweet Baby Inc. before, they're a consultancy that helps game devs with story narratives. To be specific, they try to promote diversity, equity and inclusion. Now, Unknown 9 was supposed to be a transmedia project consisting of games, books, podcasts and more. Similar to Concord, they wanted Unknown to be a global media franchise. Awakening is an action-adventure title that would see you playing as Hardona. You have the ability to switch between dimensions, jump into enemies' bodies and control them, whilst exploring the Gothic landscapes of Portugal. Now this sounds cool, so what exactly went wrong? The game released to mixed reviews, with only 17% of critics recommending it. Xbox Achievements stated the game looks horrible, features mechanics from over 15 years ago, and a story that will put you to sleep. And just to remind you of games that released 15 years ago, well, there's Red Dead Redemption, Pokemon Black and White, and Fallout New Vegas. None of these would put you to sleep. I've just got one more point to make before we move on. Now, they used Anya Chalotra for the motion capture in game. Now, she looks good in real life, so I don't understand why they made her ugly in game. That's just my 2 cents, let me know if you agree. We've got our first quadruple A game on the list. The AAA title was too poor for this game, which is of course Skull and Bones. This is an action-adventure game where you can roleplay as a pirate. Well, kinda. Development started in 2013, and yes, you heard me correctly. It was originally supposed to be a DLC for Assassin's Creed 4, which was changed again, turning it into an MMO. Ubisoft then said, fuck it, let's just make it its own IP. Skull and Bones revealed at E3 back in 2017, with a release date of 2018. The game was delayed year after year until 2020, when the game's development would go in another direction. Now, reports started to emerge that Skull and Bones would be cancelled, but this wasn't possible due to the Singaporean government funding development of the game. This meant that no matter what state the game was in, it had to be released. After 3 more years of delays, the game finally released in February 2024. It received a mixed response, with GameSpot stating it would take an entire overhaul to fix the game due to the reliance of repetitive and menial activities, and that's just a real nice way of saying the game's boring. Up next is Pneumata, a psychological horror that I was actually going to purchase. Now, I planned on reviewing the game, but it was delayed several times, so I decided to leave it. The game boasted a world where you'd question reality, scavenging for weapons and supplies, as well as piecing clues together in order to solve a series of murders. But the reviewers weren't fond of this one, especially Seasoned Gaming, who gave it a 3 out of 10. Now, they stated the promise of examining crime scenes and putting on your detective hat fell short. There was barely any puzzle solving, and you'd find the odd VHS tape scattered around. The story is mentioned at the start of the game and put on the back burner for the rest of the playthrough. Once enemies have seen you, you're not getting away. Similar to when cheaters use ESP on Tarkov, but the biggest problem was the game's technical issues. Now, these include bugs, glitches and crashes that can wipe your progress. Pneumata has a mixed rating on Steam, with only 38 players leaving a review. Now, the game was only made by one person and they clearly needed a bit more time. They've got a massive patch planned for Q1, so hopefully they can remedy these issues. At number 6 we have Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League, an adventure shooter title developed by Rocksteady Studios. There's no definitive start date on when development began, but I'd wager it was after Arkham Knight in 2015. This was going to be a follow-up to the Arkham series, and people around the world were excited. Red flags would be raised when the game was delayed from 2022 to 23 and then delayed another year into 2024. Now, gamers that purchased the upgrade edition were given 72 hours early access to play the game. However, there was a game-breaking bug that automatically completed the game. Can you imagine waiting for a game for years, paying more for early access, waiting for it to download, for it to auto-complete as soon as you start the campaign? Like you literally paid to speedrun the game without even having to play it. GG's, you just got Rocksteady. Rocksteady knew the game had issues, so they didn't send game reviewers early access codes. It received mixed reviews across the board, with IGN giving it a 5. They stated it was repetitive and a bland looter shooter that doesn't stay fun for long enough. But what about the sales? Well, Warner Brothers reported a loss of over $200 million on Suicide Squad and a decline of 41% in their year-over-year revenue. Now, I'm no accountant, but I can tell you that's bad. If I was an accountant, I'd tell them we need money, preferably more. We've made it to the halfway point, and Test Drive Unlimited Solar Crown is number 5. Now, Test Drive is an online racing game, and it's the first installment that requires a constant internet connection. That's right, another game that abandoned their roots and went with the always online approach. Well, there is a bit more to the story. Atari owns the rights for Test Drive, and they've done nothing with the IP since 2011, and that's when Test Drive Unlimited 2 released. Now, that's where Nacon come along, as they agreed a licensing deal with Atari to bring Test Drive back from the brink. But to compete with games like Forza and GTA, they decided to make it an always online game. Development started at some point from 2018 and was revealed at Nacon Connect in 2021. The game would be delayed in 2022 with a new date of 2023 and then further delayed until 2024. They also decided to cancel working on the PS4 and Xbox One versions to focus on the 9th gen of consoles, aka they didn't have enough time to work on them and they had to adhere to a final deadline. The game received mixed reviews, but it sits at mostly negative with 4,300 reviews. So instead of taking a look at what the journalists said, let's take a look at what our fellow gamers had to say about it. I can't wait for AI to make better games. I'd rather to play about this game. But don't worry guys, I've saved the best for last. If the crew in Forza Horizon had an aborted child and somehow survived, this is what you'd be looking at. It's safe to say this guy wasn't happy, as if someone had punctured his tyre. Next is the Inquisitor, an action-adventure game based on a series of novels. Now, the game places a lot of emphasis on faith and religion. You're essentially an enforcer of God carrying out investigations against sinners. There are some branching story choices and a bit of melee combat. But you're not here for a game preview, so what went wrong? Well, Game Watcher gave the Inquisitor a 3 out of 10. They stated the visuals look incredibly dated, clunky animations, and voice performances that weren't up to par. Plenty of other critics had issues with the game's performance. These included frame drops, screen tearing, and plenty of bugs. It currently has a mixed rating on Steam with 227 reviews, and a few people said it looks like a PS2 game. Now, I wouldn't go that far, but it could definitely be on the PS3. The Last of Us, GTA 5, and Final Fantasy 13, they're all graphically clear of the Inquisitor, with the latter releasing 16 years ago. And also, look at the facial animations. What the fuck was going on here? Parappa the Rapper had better animations, and that released on the PS1 in 1996. Actually, you know what? Maybe this could have released on the PS2. We have a weapons-based 3D fighting game at number 3 in Die by the Blade, but this game had to add a twist to separate it from the competition. One-hit kills. Yes, one-hit kills in a fighting game. Just like on the Nintendo Entertainment System, you can meet your demise with one fell swoop. But how did Die by the Blade end up on the list? Well, VG247 gave it a 2 out of 5 and had this to say: the character animations are bad, especially when dodging or rolling. There were issues with the menus and loading screens, and a limited number of characters and weapons. Sklash is a good example of a one-hit kill fighter, with Bushido Blade being the original. Now, Die by the Blade holds a score of 51 on OpenCritic, with only 18% of critics recommending it. There's apparently no one playing the game either, with players unable to find matches, similar to me when I log into Bumble. Our runner-up at number 2 is Looney Tunes' Wacky World of Sports. It features a variety of sports games, including golf, tennis, and basketball, that you can play locally with up to 4 players. Now, this game is clearly targeted towards kids and families, but that doesn't protect it from criticism. The character movement as well as animations are bad. When moving, the animations are really stiff, as if you can only move in 4 directions. It's similar to when using a PS1 controller before the analog stick was added. The enemy AI seems like they've had a drink or two, as I've seen them go and stand in the corner whilst in the middle of a game. And this wasn't just a one-off, it's a common habit. The guys that programmed the AI were clearly trolling. And for a game with barely any content, why are the load times so long? It's like the Elder Scrolls Oblivion all over again, but at least Oblivion was good, so you didn't mind waiting. The game being bad isn't even the worst part. This game is $50. Yes, this this mobile game is $50. Go and buy 2 bottles of JD instead, at least you'll have some fun. If you spend $50 on this, you'll just get angry, realizing your pants have been pulled down and you've been taken for a ride, baby. And coming in at number 1 is Jujutsu Kaisen Cursed Clash, another anime arena fighter that is underwhelming. Why is the best anime always turned into a button-mashing arena fighter? The game holds a score of 44 on OpenCritic, 44 on Metacritic, and then there's Eurogamer who gave it a 1. They stated the story was short and pointless, terrible character selection and netcode, and a poor attempt at an endless co-op mode. There's also the issue of character balancing, with only a few being viable, and those that are viable can use ranged attacks that auto-lock on and track the target. If you're fighting a close-range character, you can just spam ranged attacks from a distance. The story mode is also a reading simulator where it's told with still pictures and text on the screen. The Nintendo Entertainment System called it wants its game back, because that's what they were doing in 1983. I hate it when you have to read the cutscenes, and even more so when the game is shit. If you enjoy poorly made arena fighters with laggy gameplay and spamming one button for a few minutes, then you'll probably enjoy Cursed Clash. But for everyone else, I present you with the worst game of 2024. Well, that concludes my worst games of 2024. Do you agree with my choices, or were there some games that you think should have been included? Make sure to let me know in the comments, and if you enjoyed the video, you know what to do as you've heard it all a million times. I'll catch you all on the next one. The game received a mixed response, but it sits at mostly negative on Steam with 4,300 reviews. So instead of taking a look... Oh, planes, man! Planes driving over here. I'm trying to record. Non-stop, man.